Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome. Before we get into this week's message, I'm going to invite Brother Jeremy up in a minute. We're going to be talking about the close, the resurrection, the millennium, and judgment. Many of us have just experienced and celebrated Yom Kippur. Many have celebrated Yom Kippur, if you're a part of this congregation, in a different manner than you ever had before. And I got a lot of feedback, a lot of pushback with the chicken hat this week. People don't understand me, and that's okay. But we do understand Yahweh's word as we go through this amazing walk together. And I just wanted to share something which really brings it home, and just the culmination of this great faith that we have in Yeshua regarding Yom Kippur. It comes to us from Romans chapter 5 and verse 6. Romans chapter 5, verse 6, it is written, "For when we were still without strength, in due time Mashiach died for the ungodly. For scarcely as a Zadik, a righteous man, will one die, yet perhaps for a Tov, a good man, someone would even dare to die. But Elohim demonstrates his own love towards us in that while we were still in rebellion, Mashiach died for us. But so much more then. Having now been atoned, the Greek word there is diakao. It means to atone, be made just, to be made righteous. By his blood, we shall be saved from the wrath through him. For if, when we were enemies, we were reconciled to Yahweh through the death of his Son, how much more? How much more now, having been reconciled, we shall be saved by his life? And listen to this, verse 11. And not only that, but we also rejoice in Yahweh through our Master Yeshua HaMashiach, through whom we have now received atonement. I understand where you're all at. I understand where I have been, and it's so easy to lay aside the book of Romans because most of us had it shoved down our throat for years upon years when we were in the traditional religious dogma system. How many of you did the Romans Road? I studied the Romans Road every Wednesday morning, every Friday morning for years upon years upon years. And when I started to come into the Shabbat, the feasts of Yahweh, then what did people use to beat me down? Nothing more than the book of Romans. So how many, come on, let's be honest, when you come into Yahweh's feasts, festivals, and the wonderful, wonderful works of his full counsel, have you maybe decided that you'd set aside the book of Romans for a while and study other things? Let's be honest. And oftentimes we forget the great, powerful words that are written in this book and actually do apply that we can even understand more now in our full walk with Yahweh. Because you would never have read those verses with Yom Kippur in mind in a traditional Christian church setting. Because you had no idea what Yom Kippur was about, because that was a Jewish thing. But now you can understand, through the full counsel of Elohim, the power, the finished and completed work of Yeshua. Even though you do keep his feasts and festivals, you keep them distinctly different. You keep them distinctly different. The Greek word here in verse 11 is very telling because it really does mean atonement. It's the Greek word katalej. For we have now received the atonement. You see, many people believe that we should be keeping Yom Kippur the way the rabbis keep Yom Kippur, but they haven't got the full revelation. We have been given the wisdom of Solomon through the resurrection and the power of the Son, the Melchizedek. You have been given the wisdom of Solomon because of the indwelling of the Ruach HaKodesh, that you can see things that were hidden from those that walked in generations before you. So I pray that as we walk this road and we go into Sukkot, that there will be much revelation, because Yahweh's people are crying out and grasping at the power of his word in a new way. In a new way. Freedom from the doctrines and the dogmas of men, so that we can come into the full counsel of Elohim, empowered by the Ruach HaKodesh, that we can see things in a new and clear light. And with that, I'd like to invite again my friend, my brother Jeremy from La Duke University of Biblical Exploration, as we delve into the resurrection and the millennium, and we'll be looking at judgment. I set you up for success, for success. Welcome, brother, welcome. So when we talk about the judgment, and especially as those of us that have come into the wonderful work of Yahweh's feasts, we understand that Yom Kippur is a time when you pray for brothers, you pray for sisters, you pray for the lost, because it is an expectation of what? Yom Yahweh, the day of Yahweh, judgment, where Yahweh pours out his wrath on a Yah-rejecting society. But you and I have the responsibility to communicate the life and the atonement that is given today and is in place today, as Rav Shaliach Shaul clearly communicated in the 5th chapter and the 11th verse of the Romans, by the Melchizedek Yeshua. So judgment looks completely different to those on the revelation of Yeshua, but we are still going to have to look at what this day is in the scriptures. So with that, take us away on the millennial resurrection and the judgment.
Thank you for that awesome introduction. So it's kind of hard to talk about the judgment from this perspective that we've been talking about it, just because it's kind of all wrapped up into, I believe, one kind of major event. Maybe it spanned over a couple of days, with all these fall festivals being a shadow picture of that. I don't know that timeline. I think that's fair, though. But I think we need to look at it maybe as kind of a big kind of group of things that all happen at this moment: the coming of Messiah, the resurrection of the dead, the judgment, and the new heaven and new earth. This is all happening at the end of, in my estimation, the millennium.
So kind of like we have with the spring feasts of Yahweh, where everything compounds and comes together. We have crucifixion, resurrections, first fruits, Passover, all coming together and happening at that same time. This with the judgment, Yom Yahweh, is really that first introduction with the clarion call of the shofar at Yom Teruah. We're seeing it really embraced and impacted in the full festivals, which are upon us right now. Maybe a little bit more audio volume for Brother Jeremy. So yeah, I'm not the one to...
Is that better?
There we go.
That's better, yeah. I have to eat the mic, I think.
There you go.
So I think, for me, when I looked at these verses, I started to see the coming of Yeshua, Yahweh, in another way. And it took reading the Tanakh and shelving Revelation for a bit, just like we're talking about Romans, and just kind of, I need to get familiar with the front end of the book. And so we're just going to cover a couple of these, and I'd like you to keep in mind what we were talking about, Yeshua coming at the end of the age, the end of the world, this world, and at the coming of the world to come. So Isaiah 66:15 paints a little bit different picture of the coming of Yeshua than what we're familiar with. We're expecting, angels or saints coming in the clouds and the resurrection of the dead, and that's going to happen. For us, we get to see something very glorious and welcoming, but for others, it's a dark day. So Isaiah 66:15 says, "For behold, Yahweh will come with fire, and with his chariots like a whirlwind, to render his anger with fury, and his rebuke with flames of fire." And then 16 says, "For by fire and by his sword will Yahweh plead with all flesh, and the slain of Yahweh shall be many."
And this again is something that you would see in the temple service, is that the refining process of the grain would be through crushing, pressing, sieving, and then going through the fire. And then whatever came through the fire, that was then offered up to Yahweh as a kadosh, holy offering unto him. But the majority of what initially came from the field, the world, did not make it through that process and got burned up. So you see this throughout the scripture, and when Yahweh is going to be worshipped in spirit and in truth, it's going to be at the end of the age, and the majority of the crop from the world is not going to get through the refining process. The majority of it is going to lay on the ground and be trampled, like we discussed in previous weeks, under the feet of the righteous. Malachi 4, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we get into that. I think also a great picture is, it took me a long time to find this, but there is this picture kind of painted in the scriptures of a lion, the altar of Yahweh being called Ariel. And the reason why they call that, at least traditionally, Ariel, was because they perceived the fire coming down from heaven when they anointed in the altar with Solomon, and before that with Solomon, sorry, that the fire came down in the shape of a lion. And if you can picture this, Peter calls us lively stones or living stones. They're unhewn by man, right? So Yahweh has formed us. That's why they're stones, and the altar is made of unhewn stone. And so you have a lamb that's placed on top of it, that's slaughtered, and there's blood that's pouring over those stones. And that lamb and the blood that's covering those living stones is protecting the stones from the wrath, from the lion, from Ariel, fire coming down from heaven in the shape of a lion to consume the lamb. Mm-hmm. And it's just this, I mean, my wife painted a picture.
Amazing picture of our life in Yom Kippur, in Yeshua, that we are those living stones, and that right now we're supposed to be sacrificing our life upon the altar. We're supposed to be carving up the carnality of our lives. But ultimately, when this day comes, we need to ensure that the Lamb is above us, covering us, because the fire is going to come. The fire is going to become on the righteous and the wicked. The difference between the end result of what happens to the righteous is literally only because of one thing, because the Lamb is what covers them. That's the only thing.
Covered in the blood.
It's amazing.
You want to take
Joel, chapter 2:11, it says, "For the day of Yahweh is great and very terrible. Who can abide in it? Nobody. In fact, nobody could abide in it if it were not for the covering of the Lamb." And the 31st verse of Joel, chapter 2, says, "The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood before the great and terrible day of Yahweh." So after Sunday night, this could possibly happen.
That's right. Watch out. Yeah, I mean, how many are freaked out about that?
Right.
This for me is a bit more comforting. I don't see it as an event that actually isn't very rare to have a blood moon or a solar eclipse. But to have them happen at the same time, that's miraculous. That's something to look out for. And I think that's what we're looking at here. And again, I'd be placing this at the end of the millennium, so I wouldn't be worried about it.
Yeah, and before you jump onto that, we've had these discussions in private, but there's a lot of talk right now about the blood moons, and there have been many, and there is one coming up this Sukkot, Erev Sukkot, but we've spoken in private. Our understanding and just the distinction between what you're saying here, Can you explain that to the audience, what you believe is the difference between what, Jonathan Kahn has been speaking about, these solar eclipses, and what you believe the Bible teaches when it's saying what we've just read in Joel?
I think that it's possible that scenario is a heavenly body of some sort, or maybe it's the angels of Yahweh that come in and block out the sun, and then creating both a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse at the same time. But I don't know what it is, but it could be
different than this event that happens every couple of 100 years in your estimation and belief.
And really, these blood moons aren't rare. We, as people who maybe weren't part of Yahweh's festivals in our past, we're not really looking at the moon. I didn't know what phase of the moon it was until I started getting into the feasts, and then now it's like, oh, there's a blood moon. It's like I'm reading Joel, and I'm wow, this is the end of the days. Well, actually, it's actually pretty common for blood moons to happen on feast days, because that's when they have to happen, is on a full moon, and we have a couple of feasts that happen on a full moon. So it's not really that miraculous. And I know he ties it to historical events, but man, go YouTube it. It can be debunked in about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
The whole thing. So doesn't really tie into
what we're seeing here. In your estimation, is more of a catastrophic event rather than just something that's happening every couple of 100 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially when you see them coinciding together.
Yeah, when I see the day of Yahweh,
way.
when I see the coming of Yeshua in the scriptures, I see the end of the world. I see elements melting with a fervent heat, right? Like, it's not the beginning of something that's sort of new but sort of old, like we've been taught about the millennium in the past. It's a fresh start. It's a new heaven, new earth. The heavens roll away, right? We'll get into those scriptures. Amos 5:18 says, "Woe unto you that desire the day of Yahweh. To what end is it for you? The day of Yahweh is darkness and not light." And 5:20 says, "Shall not the day of Yahweh be darkness and not light, even very dark and no brightness in it?" So it's a day that even for us, I think, is going to be a little bit scary if there's any of us left to see it. But those that are alive to see it, it's going to be a dark day, and I don't know. You're going to see people die. I don't know that that's great, but at the same time, you're going to see your Savior coming in the clouds as well. So I'm going to have mixed emotions, I think.
In Isaiah 13:6, it is written, "Howl ye, for the day of Yahweh is at hand. It shall come as destruction, and it's going to come from the Almighty Yahweh himself."
Nahum 1:6 says, "Who can withstand his indignation? Who can endure his fierce anger? His wrath is poured out like fire. The rocks are shattered before him."
I mean, even Moshe Rabbeinu, who walked with Yahweh, led Yahweh's people, when Moshe Rabbeinu did something that Yahweh commanded him not to do, there was serious, serious consequences. So you can see, even through the lives of the great men of Scripture, the great women of Scripture, that there can be catastrophic decisions made and consequences that then are put forth in their life. And that you can really see that you and I are put into the very bosom of Yahweh because of the great work of his Son. And that's why this ministry is such a focus on the preeminence of Yeshua, because all in all, we're those living stones. And if we don't have it right, then, like Malachi says here in the 4th chapter in the 1st verse, "But behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble, and the day cometh shall burn them up, saith Yahweh of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch." So I understand this, that the wicked are tares, and they are like stubble. So depending on how wicked, how evil you are, means you're going to have grown more in wickedness. The longer you are as a tare, the longer that you're going to burn. So you can see that really what man does will be repaid to him. How much wickedness you live, how much wickedness you put forth means your tear is going to grow that much more erect, that much more prideful, and it's just going to be that better tinder to go through the fire. And there's going to be a longer pain, a longer chastisement, and a longer suffering before that tear is burnt to nothing and becomes ashes under the feet of the righteous. You know?
2 Thessalonians 1:9 ties in here. Who shall be punished with everlasting destruction from the presence of Yahweh and from the glory of his power? When I think about how all this ties together, I think we've shown a graphic before that Yahweh is this refining fire and this fuller's soap, and that I don't know if this is accurate, but I think he might be the lake of fire. I think he himself might be the glory of his power, that perfect full glory might be the thing that just destroys death and wickedness and everything just by his, like light destroys darkness. It's going to come into his presence. Wicked people, wicked things, death, hell, the things that are not of him. He's the source of life, so death can't be present. And so this coming of Yahweh, this day of Yahweh, is kind of all wrapped up into this one big event that
of his Shekinah, his presence.
Yeah,
just like when they reached out to stabilize his presence upon the ark, what happened? Destruction, because that was where he was. That was where he was, between the two cherubim. That was Yahweh's glory. That was his fire. That was his Shekinah. That was the lion, if you will. And they just reached out, destroyed again. So that would make sense to me too. 2 Peter 3:7, it is written, "But the heavens and the earth, which are now, by the same word are kept in store, reserved unto fire, against the day of judgment and perdition of wicked men." So this earth is actually got a reservation for the fire to come.
And 3:10 of 2 Peter says, "But the day of Yahweh will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with a fervent heat. The earth and the works that are therein shall be burned up."
And again, this ties in with what we're talking about, the fire, because the traditional story that's presented by the sages is that this actual phrase that is being communicated to the audience at the time of its writing was a phrase comes from a story that would be told during the temple times, is that you would have the Cohen that would be on duty at night time, and his purpose was to keep the altar afire, and they would wear the garments. Their garments would often be made, when they were old, their garments would be shredded and would be turned into the wicks that would light the menorah in the temple. So if they were to fall asleep, then the Kohen Hagadol would come in like a thief in the night to see if they were doing their duty. And if they were asleep at their post, then he would, the communication goes that he would take one of the fire pans and he would go and get the coals from the altar, and he would then throw the coals on their garments while they were asleep, and they would set a fire, and they would run out of the temple naked. Now you can see this communicated in the book of Revelation, and they would be a shame to their family, because it was known that they did what? They were asleep, and they neglected the duty of Yahweh, and they were naked and ashamed as they ran out before the people. Again, it's connected with the Kohen Hagadol, Yeshua, if you will's return at a time that you're not expecting it, that you're asleep, not doing what you're supposed to be doing, and ultimately fire and destruction from the altar is what exposes your nakedness and shame. You see, so even those old ancient stories that come down to us from generation to generation, they tie in with what we're trying to communicate today through the scriptures. I think it's fascinating. Oh, all right. It says here in 2 Peter 3:12, "Looking for and hastening unto the coming of the day of Yahweh, which the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with a fervent heat."
I don't know how anybody's going to walk into the millennium at that point.
Right.
Right? I mean, it's gone. Like everything of this earth is gone. This world is gone. And that kind of brings us back to the parable of the tares, just to remind everyone what we talked about last week, that there's a feed of wheat and tares that the Messiah is talking about. And when the harvest comes at the end of the season, right, it's not like there's harvest at the beginning and then 1,000 years go by and then another harvest here. It's at the end is when both the wheat and the tares are harvested together. And actually it even says the tares first, which is contrary to what we're taught when we're taught about Revelation and how the first resurrection is that of the righteous. But it actually says by our Messiah himself, not an interpretation of a metaphorical Revelation book or vision.
You've got to let the wheat and the tares grow up together until the sickle harvest of the Malachim. And you see the angels coming and doing the sickle harvest in the book of Revelation. But again, when you think about it, the length of the tares, the pride of life, the pride of man, tares are going to stand straight up and erect. But the wheat and the tares, they're indistinguishable. They're indistinguishable until the wheat becomes to bring forth the head and bring forth the fruit. And then the wheat then begins to, because of the weight, it begins to humble itself and bow down, yet the tare has got the pride of life. So then when the angels come, the Malachim come, they can take the sickle, and the tares are just upright and proud, and the wheat is bowed down, and therefore the tares then are gathered first and thrown into the fire. And I think about our walk, I think about my walk, and I'm going to be real with you, and my wife had testified to you this. It's a tough walk. It is a tough walk, especially being up here each and every week. There's a lot of pushback. There's a lot of spiritual warfare involved. And it comes and it takes a toll on my family. It takes a toll on my life. But I tell you what, I feel a heaviness at times. But it's the humbling of the power and the authority of Yahweh in my life, in the life of my family, in the life of the congregation. But sometimes you feel it too. It is heavy. It would be so much easier to be like the nations, to be like the world, until the day of Yahweh. So right now, yes, it's tough, and you feel that it's heavy, but it's the humbling process in preparation so that you can have life. So let everybody else have fun and have the pride of life as you walk by and humble yourself. And you don't laugh at the jokes that they laugh at. You don't watch what they watch. You don't say what they say. And you know what? You don't fit in. And it is humbling and it's kind of heavy. But that is how it's supposed to be. So be encouraged. Be encouraged. I didn't mean to go off on a tangent.
Oh, that was great, because that ties right into the parable of the tares. I mean, I don't know if people are familiar with just how all this goes down in the old days, but like you said, the wheat is bowing down with the heaviness of the fruit, and the tares are then cut down, and then they do harvest the wheat, and then that wheat is taken to the threshing floor, and at that point it's crushed. So that's kind of that refining process we were talking about in past teachings. And so that wheat is then crushed. The berries are there. They're either beaten, or you might have seen threshing floors with like a cow pulling on a sled, and that crushes the wheat. And that separates the actual kernel from the chaff. And then they take a fork and they throw it up into the air, and the wind catches the chaff, that extra stuff that's no good, and it takes it away. So there's a refining process there. And then that wheat berry is then crushed again and made into flour. And we talked about how flour is kind of a nice picture of how you can turn that into the flesh, the body that's going to be filled with the Spirit to create you a new soul. You will be born again, literally, with all the character and fruit and character of Yahweh that you have written on your heart through doing his Torah through love in Yeshua. So that's a big picture of the tares.
And I think this message, it's a heavy message. It's a heavy burden that burns on all of our hearts. It truly is. There is a burning in it. But also when you go through those times of crushing, what we're supposed to do is to accept that crushing, work through that crushing, and then have the full expectation of pressing into the wind, because the wind is then going to take, the Ruach HaKodesh is then going to what? Take off that outer hardness. You know that hardening when somebody does something and it hurts you and you kind of get that hardening? Well, the purpose is that we're supposed to humble ourselves and allow the Ruach HaKodesh then to blow that hardening away, because we don't want to end up old, bitter people. You know, you meet those old people, they've just had a hard life and they've just got all that bitterness and resentment because they didn't allow the humbling process and call on the Ruach HaKodesh to blow out that outer kernel and blow it away and to produce more fruit. I mean, it's all agriculturally there. We're an agricultural people by nature in our tribal lands of Israel. So, yeah.
So if you want to get into the parable of the tares and just review all of the pieces of it, it's in Matthew 13. And I'm just going to read this verse out of it again to kind of remind us when this takes place. It says, "So shall it be at the end of the world, the angel shall come forth and sever the wicked from among the just and shall cast them into the furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth."
Yeah, and that's
Can't be
Matthew
more clear.
13:49. So when does this harvest of the people come? The wicked and the righteous. It is very clear, the Yeshua communicates, it's at the end of the world. So shall it be at the end of the world, the angel shall come forth to that sickle harvest.
Yeah, and then he explains it in plain English for us, if you will. The field is the world, the harvest is the end of the world. As therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall be it be in the end of the world. It just can't be any more clear.
And it goes on, and we can see here that the field is the world. We see this analogy through the parable. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are, again, the children of unrighteousness and wickedness. The enemy that sowed them is Satan. The harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the Malachim, the angels. And therefore, the tares are gathered and burned with that fire, so it shall be in the end of this world. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all that offend, and them which do iniquity, and shall cast them into the furnace of fire. There shall be a wailing and a gnashing of teeth. Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Who has the ear, the blood-tipped ear, should be able to understand this. It's amazing stuff.
Yeah, and I think with that, I didn't even really catch that before. But people have argued that, well, he comes with his saints, so therefore we're in heaven, or we're somewhere where he comes with us, and that's a question that's come up about this. And when I was doing some research into this isn't the first time this type of phrase is used. It's actually in the Tanakh, and I didn't put it in my notes here, so I don't have the reference for you right now, but it says the same thing. Gosh, is it Daniel? I'm not sure. But when you go into the Septuagint, it actually tells you that it's angels instead of saints.
Oh, okay, right.
And so that actually ties in right here, because he's saying he comes with angels. That's who's coming with him, not saints as we think of them being, us, or
sons of men.
Yeah, but actually angels. So that hopefully I can get that verse for us later, and I'll post it on Facebook. Then it comes down to, what about the devil? And it's pretty
Diablos.
Revelation 20:10 says, "The devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever."
What do you all think about this Pope and the events that are happening? Very scary. The Jesuit order and the things that are being put forth and embraced by the global elite. We need to be aware. It is so dangerous. So dangerous. Man, I don't want to go off on that tangent. I'm very tempted, but I am going to hold back. I'm going to hold back. We'll save it for the fireside at Sukkot.
Ezekiel 28:18 says, "Thou hast defiled thy sanctuaries by thy multitude of thine iniquities, by the iniquity of thy traffic. Therefore will I bring forth a fire from the midst of thee. It shall devour thee, and I will bring thee to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all them that behold you." Again, I mean, there's going to be people there to be seeing these things. I mean,
Revelation 20:14, "And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire, and this is the second death."
yeah, so this was a big one for me when I started. I hadn't come yet into Torah, but I started to investigate life and death and these topics.
Was this when you were a Jesuit?
Mm-hmm. No, I was never a Jesuit, for the record. But I was never a Jesuit. This is recorded for like the people in the Millennium are going to see this and they're going to. So yeah, it was a game changer for me, and I don't know, I don't necessarily know where everybody comes from. Some people are new into Torah. Some people are, they're not always in the same place. But I always thought that people went to hell, and then, but then in here reading this, it's thrown into the lake of fire, and so.
So this
Different.
idea of an eternal burning hell, it truly is not scriptural, because hell is eventually destroyed.
Yeah.
So.
And the idea of a second death. I mean, everybody is going to be raised, the wicked and the righteous, and they're going to be raised to life. And for the wicked, that's going to be a scary day for them to face judgment. And the next scariest bit about that is that you're going to see that not only you're going to see everything that you've done, and you're going to know without a shadow of a doubt that you were the one responsible for your condition, but then you're going to know that you're going to die again, and there is no coming back from that second death. There is no second resurrection. There is no coming back from the second death.
And I think, in a society that we live in that has become so corrupted and so degraded, and you see and hear about so much of suicide today, but when you could really communicate this message to those depressed people that think that's an avenue of getting out, you actually are going to be raised up again. You're going to be resurrected. What? You see, I mean, they have all heard, well, it's the end, I'm done, But no, you can do that to yourself, but you will be raised up again. Now, that is scary to somebody that is in that desperate situation, and they think that's a way out. It's not, because you will have the resurrection. I mean, you can use this as a way to communicate the good news of the Scripture to a desperate and hopeless society. That is not the way out. Not like the Catholicos will tell you that you'll be in hell, excuse me, but that you're going to be raised up for the resurrection, even though you may be wicked. But the wicked and the just will be raised.
Yeah, you're going to stand in your own self-righteousness. You're going to stand there before the one who is righteous, the righteous one. And are you sure? I mean, are you sure that you're not going to come back from the dead? Do you have any idea? I mean, none of us know, except for what the scriptures tell us. These guys are guessing. Atheists are guessing. They don't know what comes after, if there's anything.
Yeah.
So are you sure that nothing's coming after this? Because I'm telling you that there's a judgment after this, and that you're not going to want to be there if you don't have the covering. So. That's all I've got.
Oh, it's frozen. It's frozen.
Oh, that's it.
All right.
That's all I got.
Death and hell are cast into the lake of fire, and this is the second death.
We got a new heaven and new earth after that.
And a new heaven and a new earth. So the questions that have been posed since we began this conversation a few weeks ago, it's been really hard for a lot of people to kind of grasp and comprehend. First and foremost, that we've presented the belief that Yeshua is going to come back at the end of the millennium, And the reality that we believe through the scripture is that the millennium is a time where natural humans in their natural bodies will be working and toiling and going through that period for the 1,000 years. And that's been hard for a lot of people to grasp because of the predominant theology of the day is the pre-millennial return. Can you kind of comment on that and maybe some of the feedback and the pushback that you've had over the years when you've communicated and presented this to various peoples and audiences?
Yeah, there's actually 3 different views in Christianity about the millennium, and they're pretty broad, and ours don't really even fit into the 3 really. But there's premillennialism, which is where a majority of evangelicals fall, and there's amillennialism, and there's postmillennialism. And I'm not going to get into the definitions of each of those, but some of the arguments against postmillennialism is that in the postmillennial view, the Christian view, the world's supposed to get better and better and better, and we obviously see it getting worse and worse and worse. And so I would differ in my view, and I'm not really saying I'm saying that I believe in a postmillennial theology, but it's a postmillennial return of Yeshua. So it's distinct from what you're going to read out there regarding those 3. But you should know that Christianity has had those 3 views since its inception.
Right.
This isn't the concept of Yeshua coming after the millennium isn't new to us. It's not new to Christianity in general. So you can read about the arguments out there and just know that this is somebody else's interpretation. There's 3 different major interpretations, and you can go and you can read the arguments and you can decide. And this is what I've done: is I've read the arguments and I've decided that I don't see that part of it as true. You don't have to accept the whole thing, and you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater either. So.
Another thing that's come up, and you understand my belief with the Melchizedek priesthood, we've spoken a lot about that, and from where I'm coming from, people have questioned, well, how can you teach this in line with what you're teaching about the Melchizedek priesthood? And what would you say as far as that's concerned?
Putting me on the spot.
I know.
Well, this is where Matthew and I disagree. We've had lots of conversations about it, and I still don't really get where he's coming from. But I'm open to it, and that's the heart I think that we want to have about this. I take Ezekiel 37 onward and so forth at face value. I think that there are sacrifices that go on during that time, just as we look forward, or they looked forward to Yeshua through the sacrifices, that we would be looking back on that, doing the same thing. Because if we read in Hebrews, it says the blood of bulls and goats never took away sin. Never did. Not back then. It's not going to do it in the future. So what was the purpose? It was a shadow picture. It's going to be a shadow picture for whenever he's not here physically. So if he doesn't return for that 1,000 years, then we have shadow pictures to still give us that very real. I don't know if anybody's participated in any kind of thing like that. I know I've done I know this is taboo, but I have been a part of a Passover where we did slaughter a lamb for dinner. And just the process of slaughtering an animal wasn't a sacrifice unto Yahweh, but it was a slaughter for dinner, and it was brutal. It was brutal, and we did it humanely. It was brutal.
With that understanding, with somebody that understands a Melchizedek differently than the way that you do, what you're seeing is that with Yeshua coming at the end of the millennium, that you understand that the book of Ezekiel, that there will be sacrifices because there's going to be still sinners in the world. Right. And it's going to be a covering for those sinners in the world by a priesthood. Is that correct?
Well, I wouldn't say that they are actually getting a literal covering. I would say that just as
a reminder. It's a reminder of the authority of Yahweh and His supremacy and theocracy and what it's established on.
Right, and I would say that hopefully this millennium that I'm depicting is one that's in Yeshua, and that picture is constantly being reminded.
So even with the Melchizedek priesthood understanding myself, you could that could be a justifiable explanation that would work. Because, again, you're taking the book of Ezekiel at face value. And that could work and still be able to communicate what I'm communicating by the supremacy of the Melchizedek priesthood. Now, I don't believe that myself, and I'll be teaching on that during Sukkot, on how I understand the book of Ezekiel was actually a conditional covenant that was promised. And this isn't my idea. This is actually was a very popular theology in the 19th century. But again, at the beginning of the 20th century, and we had the whole Zionist explosion, and in 1948, with the birth of the State of Israel and Zionist Christianity, what I'm going to be talking about went by the wayside. The 19th century common theology was that the book of Ezekiel was a conditional covenant that was given to Israel in exile, and they didn't take hold of it, and therefore it isn't going to pass as some future event. Whether you take the view that Jeremy has, which is literal, or the view that I'm going to be presenting, either way, you can still have a Melchizedek priesthood and the preeminence of Yeshua, you see. And now your interpretation of that Melchizedek priesthood, again, people interpret it differently, you and I do. But again, these shouldn't be things that divide us. These should be things that cause us to go deeper into the Word together, to draw out those living a pagan, corrupted, and half-assed lifestyle. Can you say that? I just did. But anyway, so, Brother Steve, do we have any questions, comments in the back? All right, he's going to ask.
You know, there's a big delay, so we can,
Yes.
you know, there's, I think, 30-second delay from what's out there when we ask that question. So, anybody here?
Anybody here? Questions, comments, ideas?
I have the word crap written here. It says Christianized replica adulterating praise. C-R-A-P. Anyway, my question.
Okay.
It goes right along with the other half.
Okay. Yeah.
Something came to mind here. The starting of that millennial reign, I could see how what you're saying is taking place, like is about to take place during that period of time. We might see that going on. So it begs me to say, well, when did that start? When did the millennial reign start? Has it started already? Are we already in that?
So the question is, has the millennium started? Has the millennial reign started?
Good question.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on, you know, which calendar you're on, and you
Right.
know. That's a whole nother
So
topic.
now that brings us to the calendar. And what
Yeah, we've still got a few minutes.
we
left.
can wrap this up in 5 minutes.
Yes, we do, and we actually have calendar questions as well.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Note to self, Brother John, that we should buy another microphone.
Yeah. So to attempt to answer that question, it's just you know depends on the calendar. I don't know what year it is, but there might be that discovery here soon. You know, I think because it's whether we're 200 years out or we're 9 years in, as some calendars out there say. I think either way, it's going to happen over a period of time. You know, it's like the exile took time to take all the people out. It's going to take time to bring everybody in. So there's going to be quite a bit of war and lots of stuff happening. It's got to take time. So I don't think it's going to be an overnight thing.
Yes.
Yes, I do have a question. We have a question from Noah. Are they saying they think Christ returns in the clouds after the 1,000 years, which follows the period of tribulation?
So the question was, are we saying we believe that Yeshua returns after the 1,000-year millennial reign? Yes.
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 After tribulation was the tail end.
And the
Yes.
tail end of that was after the tribulation. Yes.
Say that again, please.
So the question was, have we been teaching over these past few weeks that we believe that Yeshua is going to return after the 1,000-year millennial reign and after the tribulation that would be before the destruction of this earth? Yes.
Still going to see that tribulation period as we've been taught with the 3.5 years and the peace.
Yes, but it's going to be at the end of the millennial. But if we look to what's called Yaakov's trouble, Jacob's trouble, we can understand from the Torah that Jacob had two troubles, both lasting 21 years. So Jacob's trouble, we see that he did have two troubles. He had the trouble when he was with Laban, and he also had the trouble when Joseph, his son, his beloved, departed from him. So again, the picture of Jacob's trouble is, I believe, that you're going to see a time of trouble before the millennium, which is actually going to usher in the millennium. Now, what is going on in Syria with Iran and Russia right now? Could this possibly be the event coinciding with the Italian Pope, the Jesuits?
I'm not a Jesuit.
No. Could this be the event that would be that Jacob's trouble that is going to bring the whole world upside down, the financial crisis and that? Do I believe that that's possible? I think that we're going to see a Jacob's trouble that's going to usher us into the millennium. That's my understanding of eschatology. And then at the end of the 1,000 years, you will have the second Jacob's trouble, or the great tribulation. Because Jacob's time with Laban was Jacob's trouble, but it was nothing like the heart of Jacob being ripped out for the time that his beloved son Joseph was taken. That was Jacob's great tribulation. You see, so again, the more time we spend in the Torah, the more time and more understanding that we have in the Brit Hadashah, I believe. So, yes, another question. You had another question back there?
It really all goes back to the calendar. Which one are we on this coming year is what people are asking.
Yeah, and there have been some questions about the calendar. Jeremy and I did the calendar conversation earlier in the year. And as a community, Torah to the tribes, we had already made preparations, made financial commitments, made commitments with brothers and sisters from all over the nation to come and spend Sukkot at this time tomorrow on the Hillel calendar. So we kept our commitments, we kept our word, and we continue to do that. So I did not change over to what we were discussing earlier in the year because of that. I believe that was the right thing to do. So, beginning next year, Aviv 1, we're going to start implementing here at Torah to the Tribes the calendar that we discussed earlier in the year. But we're going to begin that on Aviv 1, which was the solar calendar, which begins next year on Aviv 1. So we'll be looking for that equinox event. So, yes. Oh, yes, brother, you had a question in front.
Basically, I was asking a question about tribulation and the millennium.
Okay.
And I wasn't sure. Now, I know it says that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that he is Lord.
Yes.
So we're all going to stand before him. It's appointed unto man once to die, but after death there comes a judgment. And I just love, I'm proud to be here.
Baruch Hashem, Yahweh, hallelujah.
I tell you how much of a blessing you are.
Oh,
Amen.
Freedom you can feel in the Ruach.
thank you.
Being here with y'all.
Oh, bless you, bless you. We are so excited to have many of you that have come from out of state for Sukkot, and I am so looking forward to this time. What is the weather report for Sukkot? It's looking good. It's a beautiful area right down the river. Oh, we are so blessed. So, Brother John, come on up, and first and foremost, I just want to thank you for your friendship and for your brain. And for your Ruach HaKodesh. It's been great having him here for the past month, and really been a blessing to be able to communicate clearly. But brother, would you talk to us about some housekeeping for Sukkot and, yes, anything else?
Housekeeping.
Brother
for Sukkot.
Steve, come up too. Let me.
Check-in's going to be 2:00 tomorrow.
And Rob, let's get Rob up here
Rob,
too.
come on, Rob.
Rob's, Rob pretends to be shy, but he's really not.
Yes. Yeah.
He pretends to be.
And then once we get camp set up at 7 o'clock, we're going to have a gathering at the gazebo.
So
Yeah.
first and foremost, this is John. This is Rob, and this is Steve. These gentlemen will be helping you out with any of your needs at Sukkot. So if you have any questions, you can just go and bang on their door late at night, early in the morning, yank on their power cords, and we've got radios too. And if you don't have any joy with them, then stand up, Brother Sean. You can always come. If you have any problems with your children getting to sleep, we have the baby whisperer. We have the baby whisperer.
So anyhow, we'll make some more announcements at 7 o'clock as we gather under the gazebo for tea and crumpets at 7
Oh, yeah.
o'clock. And we'll have a welcoming time and a time to get to know one another a little better, and then we'll have some more announcements, more specifics then. But we
Okay.
look forward to seeing you all there. And like Matthew said, it's been an overwhelming blessing, the journey we're on, and we're so thankful to be a part of it. Amen.
Baruch Hashem, yes.
What campsite are you at?
Me, I am, me. Oh, yeah, what are you at?
Yeah, it's going to be D8.
What, me?
I'm kidding.
I'm like, what?
They're all going to show up at your
Yeah,
campsite.
DA.
I am at C3, I think. But we'll get all that dialed in when we get there. We're going to have a first aid site for our first aid and questions and itineraries and stuff. So.
The main thing you need to know.
Is
The main
he's an
thing you need to
ex-Marine.
know, yeah, former Marine. No, is that 6B is where the mac and cheese is going to be on Monday and Wednesday.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
We're already there, and we're
Okay.
just curious as to
Right.
where.
On the east end of the camp is pretty much where we've all gathered. Everyone's got sites along the east end. And
Do you already have like a group reservation?
Yes, in
made
fact-
Because there's like a group reservation members only.
yeah, you got to be inside. You want to be inside the camp. Yes. Yeah. That's fine. No, that's fine. But it's going to be on the east side of the camp. You'll see a gazebo towards the east side. Okay, it's an open gazebo right in the middle of a parking lot area. Okay. But just show up at 7 o'clock tomorrow night at the welcoming time. and
But
we'll
people
get you all
can
that.
start arriving at 2,
Yeah, 2 o'clock is
2
check-in
o'clock
time.
and check in. But we
Yeah.
don't have to check in, we just show up, right?
Yeah, just show up.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, you're already there. We're going to check into your place then.
Very good. Very good.
And Season, you're ready to rock it? We've got some Navajo dancing. Nice. All right, Baruch Hashem Yahweh. Thriller?